8 years. For 8 long years, my daughter prayed for the day someone would call her mom. She survived brutal military training. She still insisted on mowing my lawn before I could do it myself. She still laughed at the same old family jokes. Years passed. She completed one mission after another. She earned promotions. She received medals. People began calling her a hero. Whenever I congratulated her, she always gave the same answer. "I was just doing my job, Dad." That was the kind of woman she became. Strong enough to face danger. Humble enough to never ask for praise. As parents, we believed the hardest part of her life was already behind her. We thought that after everything she had survived, God was finally preparing to bless her with the peaceful life she deserved. We had no idea that the greatest test of her life wasn't waiting on a battlefield. It was waiting for her in the form of someone who would one day promise to love her forever. Looking back now, I sometimes ask myself the same question over and over. If I had met him just 1 year earlier, would I have seen the truth hiding behind his smile? Or was he simply the kind of man who knew exactly how to become the person everyone wanted him to be? The first time my daughter mentioned him, there wasn't anything unusual in her voice. She wasn't excited. She wasn't acting like a teenager in love. She simply said, "Dad, I met someone." I smiled and asked, "Is he another soldier?" She laughed. "No, he's a civilian." That answer surprised me. For years, almost everyone around her had been connected to the military. This man wasn't. He worked in a private engineering company that often partnered with military contractors. Their first meeting wasn't romantic at all. A charity event had been organized to raise money for the families of injured service members. My daughter had volunteered to help. He was there representing his company. According to her, they barely spoke that day. Just a few polite conversations. Nothing more. A week later, they happened to meet again at another event connected to veterans and military families. Then again, and then again. Life kept placing them in each other's path. Little by little, conversations became longer. He never asked about her medals. He never seemed impressed by her uniform. Instead, he asked about her favorite books, her childhood, her family, the things no one else ever seemed interested in. For the first time in years, she felt like someone was seeing the woman behind the uniform. Months passed. He started visiting our home. The first evening he came for dinner, I watched him more than I listened. Every father does. He was polite, respectful. He helped clear the table without being asked. Before leaving, he thanked my wife for the meal and shook my hand firmly. After he drove away, my wife smiled. "I like him." I nodded. "So do I." Today, those words still haunt me. Over the following year, he became part of our family. He never missed birthdays. He remembered anniversaries. If I needed help fixing something around the house, he showed up before I even finished asking. Sometimes I'd catch my daughter looking at him with the kind of peaceful smile every father hopes to see on his child's face. It made me believe she had finally found the happiness she deserved. One autumn evening, he invited all of us to dinner. Halfway through the meal, he stood up from his chair. His hands were shaking. He looked directly at my daughter. Then he slowly knelt on one knee. The entire restaurant became silent. He pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a simple diamond ring. Nothing flashy. Nothing expensive. Just beautiful. With tears already filling his eyes, he asked, "Will you spend the rest of your life with me?" She didn't answer right away. She looked at me, then at her mother. Both of us smiled. She turned back toward him, with tears running down her face. She whispered, "Yes." The whole restaurant erupted into applause. People we had never met were clapping for them. That night, while driving home, my wife reached over and held my hand. "I think our little girl finally found her forever." I believe that too. Their wedding took place 6 months later. It wasn't a huge ceremony, just close family. A few military friends, and the people who mattered most. I've looked at those wedding photographs more times than I can count. Every smile looked real. Every laugh sounded genuine. If someone had told me that one day those same photographs would become too painful to look at, I would have called them crazy. After the wedding, they bought a small house together. Nothing luxurious. Just a warm little home filled with dreams. On weekends, they painted walls together, built furniture together, argued over where pictures should hang, then laughed 5 minutes later. Whenever they came over for dinner, they looked happy. The kind of happy that makes parents sleep peacefully at night. Months slowly turned into years. 1 year, then 3, then 5. By the 8th year of their marriage, people had started asking the same question over and over. When are you two going to have children? Neither of them ever answered. They would simply smile, change the subject, and pretend those questions didn't hurt. But behind the front door of their home, there was a silent pain neither of them spoke about. And although they tried their hardest to hide it from the rest of us, a storm had already begun to gather over the family they had worked so hard to build. The older generation has a habit of asking questions they don't realize can break someone's heart. Every family gathering seemed to end the same way. So, when are we finally going to hear the good news? Some people asked with excitement. Others asked out of curiosity. None of them knew how much those simple words hurt my daughter. She would smile politely, change the subject, then quietly leave the room a few minutes later. At first, she and her husband laughed those questions off. We're not in a hurry. Maybe next year. Everything happens at the right time. Those became their usual answers. But as the years passed, those smiles slowly disappeared. Doctors' appointments became more frequent. Medical tests filled entire folders. Specialists offered different opinions. Some gave hope. Others only created more confusion. Month after month, they waited, prayed, hoped, and every month ended the same way. Disappointment. Not once did my daughter complain. She never blamed God. She never blamed anyone. Whenever her mother asked how she was feeling, she always smiled and said, "I'm okay, Mom." But mothers always know. Late one evening, my wife called me into the kitchen. I heard her crying today. My heart sank. "Are you sure?" She nodded. I didn't go in. I knew she didn't want anyone to see her like that. That night, I couldn't sleep. As a father, there are moments when you would give anything to carry your child's pain yourself. But this wasn't one of those pains I could fix. All I could do was pray. Years continued to pass. Their 8th wedding anniversary arrived. That evening, they came over for dinner. They looked happy. At least, they wanted us to believe they were. After dessert, my daughter reached into her purse. She handed a small envelope to her mother. "Open it." My wife looked confused. "What is it?" My daughter only smiled. "Just open it." Inside the envelope was a sonogram picture. For a few seconds, the room became completely silent. My wife stared at the picture. Then she looked up. Her hands began to shake. "No." My daughter nodded. "Yes." The next moment, my wife burst into tears. She wrapped her arms around our daughter and refused to let go. I don't mind admitting it. I cried too. After 8 long years, our family had finally received the miracle we had been praying for. That night was filled with laughter. We talked about baby names, who the baby would look like, whether it would be a boy or a girl. For the first time in years, Hope had returned to our home. The pregnancy wasn't easy. Because of her military career and the physical demands she had endured over the years, the doctors considered her pregnancy high risk. They ordered plenty of rest, regular checkups, no unnecessary stress. Her husband seemed incredibly caring. He drove her to every appointment. He carried every grocery bag. He never let her lift anything heavy. Watching him, I often thanked God. I believed my daughter had chosen the right man. 9 months later, our entire family stood outside the delivery room. Every minute felt like an hour. Then, we heard it. The tiny cry of a newborn baby. A nurse stepped into the hallway with the biggest smile on her face. "Congratulations. It's a beautiful baby girl." At that moment, nothing else in the world mattered. When they finally placed that tiny little girl into my daughter's arms, I saw tears running down her face. She gently kissed her daughter's forehead and whispered, "I've waited for you my whole life." Standing beside her, her husband smiled as he looked at both of them. If someone had taken a photograph of that exact moment, they would have captured what looked like a perfect family. But sometimes, the happiest pictures hide the saddest stories. Because not long after our granddaughter came into this world, I began noticing something about my son-in-law. Something so small that none of us realized it was the beginning of everything that would eventually tear our family apart. People often think families fall apart because of one big mistake. That isn't true. Most families don't break in a single day. They break one small crack at a time. Until one morning, the whole foundation collapses. At first, none of us noticed anything unusual. A newborn changes everything. Sleepless nights become normal. Exhaustion becomes part of everyday life. So when my son-in-law started coming home a little later than usual, No one questioned it. He always had an explanation. There was an emergency meeting. A client kept me late. Traffic was terrible. The excuses sounded reasonable. My daughter believed every word. So did I. Our granddaughter was only a few weeks old when I noticed the first change. Every evening, the moment he walked through the front door, the baby would stretch out her tiny hands toward him. She recognized her father's voice. She wanted to be held. Sometimes he smiled and picked her up. Other times, he would force a smile and say, "I'm exhausted." Then he would walk straight into the bedroom. I told myself he was simply tired. After all, new fathers get overwhelmed too. Weeks turned into months. His overtime became more frequent. Family dinners became less frequent. Phone calls became shorter. Even when he was sitting beside my daughter, his attention was somewhere else. One Sunday afternoon, they came to visit us. My granddaughter had just learned how to laugh. She was sitting on my lap, giggling every time I made funny faces. The whole room was filled with happiness. Then his phone vibrated. He looked at the screen. For just a second, the smile disappeared from his face. He quickly stood up. "I need to take this." He walked outside. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. When he finally returned, he looked distracted. My daughter asked, "Everything okay?" He nodded without looking at her. "Yeah, just work." That answer ended the conversation. But it didn't end the feeling growing inside me. Something wasn't right. A few weeks later, I stopped by their house to drop off some groceries. My daughter was upstairs putting the baby to sleep. He was sitting alone in the living room. His phone rang again. This time, he didn't notice that I was close enough to hear. He answered quietly, "I told you not to call me here." A few seconds later, he lowered his voice even more. "I'll handle it. Just give me a little more time." Then he hung up. The moment he turned around and saw me standing in the hallway, his face went completely pale. He forced an awkward smile. "Business problems." I nodded. Maybe he was telling the truth. Maybe he wasn't. I had no proof. And I wasn't about to accuse my daughter's husband based on a single phone call. So I stayed silent. Looking back now, I wish I hadn't. As the months passed, more little things began to change. He started keeping his phone face down. He added a password that even my daughter didn't know. If a message arrived, he read it immediately. Sometimes he walked outside before answering. Sometimes he locked himself in the spare bedroom while talking on the phone. Whenever my daughter asked if something was wrong, he would kiss her forehead and say, "You're imagining things." She wanted to believe him. Because love has a strange way of convincing us that the people we trust would never lie. One evening, while rocking her baby to sleep, my daughter quietly said something to me that I have never forgotten. "Dad, do you ever feel like someone can be sitting right beside you and still be 1,000 miles away?" I looked into her eyes. For the first time since her daughter had been born, I didn't see happiness. I saw confusion. I saw loneliness. I saw a woman trying desperately to convince herself that her marriage was still the same. I told her, every marriage has difficult seasons. They'll pass. I believed those words when I said them. Today, they're one of my biggest regrets. Because while we were hoping things would get better, someone else had already stepped into my son-in-law's life. And none of us knew that our family's worst day was getting closer with every passing week. For the next few weeks, my daughter tried to convince herself that everything was normal. Whenever he came home late, she smiled. Whenever he canceled dinner plans, she smiled. Whenever he spent more time staring at his phone than talking to his family, she smiled. Not because she believed nothing was wrong, but because she was afraid of what she might discover if she asked too many questions. Our granddaughter was growing fast. She had just started crawling across the living room floor. Every time her father walked into the house, she would crawl toward him as fast as her little hands and knees could carry her. Sometimes he picked her up. Sometimes he walked right past her. Watching that little girl sit on the floor with her arms still reaching toward her father hurt more than I can describe. One Saturday afternoon, my daughter brought the baby to our house. She looked exhausted. Dark circles had formed under her eyes. While my wife played with our granddaughter, I quietly asked, "Are you sleeping at all?" She gave me a tired smile. "The baby sleeps better than I do." I knew she wasn't talking about the baby. After a long silence, she finally spoke. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "If someone changes, how do you know whether they're going through a difficult time or whether they've stopped loving you?" I didn't answer immediately. No father wants to hear that question from his daughter, especially not the daughter who had spent years risking her life for other people. I looked at her and said, "Love isn't measured by words. It's measured by what people choose to do every single day." She nodded slowly, but I could tell my answer hadn't given her any peace. A few days later, something happened that she couldn't ignore. She was doing laundry when his phone, which he had forgotten on the kitchen counter, suddenly lit up. She wasn't trying to invade his privacy. She only glanced at the screen because she thought it might be work. Instead, she saw a message from a contact whose name she had never seen before. The message was short. "I miss you already. I can't wait to see you again." Her hands froze. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. She stared at the screen, hoping another message would appear explaining everything. Nothing did. Just then, he walked into the kitchen. The moment he saw his phone in her hands, he rushed forward and snatched it away. His face turned cold. "What are you doing?" She looked at him, completely confused. "I wasn't reading your messages." It just lit up. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then he sighed. "It's a client. She jokes like that." He laughed, but the laugh sounded forced. My daughter wanted to believe him. She truly did, because accepting his explanation was far less painful than accepting the possibility that he was lying. That night, she cried quietly after putting her daughter to bed. She never told me about the message. Not then. She kept it locked inside her heart. But secrets have a way of growing heavier every day. The following weekend, she decided to surprise him. He had texted that he would be working late at the office. She packed his favorite dinner into a small bag. She placed her sleeping daughter in the car. Then she drove across town, smiling to herself. She thought he would be happy to see them. She had no idea that before the night was over, the first piece of her perfect marriage would shatter forever. By the time she reached his office, the parking lot was almost empty. Most of the lights inside the building had already been turned off. She checked the time. It was nearly 8 o'clock. He had told her he would be working late. So she smiled, picked up the bag of food, and quietly lifted her sleeping daughter from the car seat. The little girl rested her head against her mother's shoulder, completely unaware of what was about to happen. When my daughter reached the front entrance, the security guard looked surprised. "Good evening, ma'am." She smiled politely. "I'm here to surprise my husband. He said he's still working." The guard frowned. "Your husband?" She nodded. "Yes." He hesitated for a moment before saying, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but everyone left almost an hour ago." My daughter felt her smile disappear. "Are you sure?" "Yes. I watched the last employees leave myself." She stood there in silence. Maybe he had gone to another office. Maybe he had stepped out for dinner. Maybe there was a simple explanation. She thanked the guard and walked back to her car. On the drive home, she kept repeating the same sentence in her mind. There has to be a reason. When she walked into the house an hour later, he still wasn't home. At a little after 10, the front door finally opened. He looked tired. At least, he wanted her to think he was. He smiled when he saw her. "You're still awake?" She looked at him calmly. "I went to your office tonight." For the first time, his smile disappeared. "You what?" "I wanted to surprise you with dinner." The security guard said everyone left an hour before I got there. A long silence filled the room. Then he rubbed the back of his neck and laughed. "I forgot to tell you. A client asked me to meet him outside the office." It completely slipped my mind. His answer came too quickly, almost as if it had already been prepared. She stared at him for several seconds. Then she quietly nodded. "Okay." She walked upstairs without saying another word. That single word, "okay," worried him far more than if she had shouted. Because for the first time, she had stopped arguing. She had stopped asking questions. She had started watching. Over the next few days, she noticed things she had ignored before. Receipts from expensive restaurants he had never taken her to. A new bottle of cologne she had never seen. Fresh shirts appearing in his closet even though she hadn't bought them. Small details. Individually, they meant nothing. Together, they painted a picture she was terrified to see. One afternoon, while cleaning the family car, she opened the glove compartment looking for the registration papers. Instead, she found a small gift bag. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet. It wasn't hers. She knew that immediately. There was also a folded receipt. The purchase had been made just 3 days earlier. Their wedding anniversary. She remembered that day perfectly. He had apologized for being too busy to buy her a gift. He had promised to make it up to her later. She slowly closed the gift bag. Then she sat inside the car without moving. She didn't cry. Not yet. Sometimes the truth hurts so deeply that even tears refuse to come. That evening she called me. "Dad, can you come over tomorrow?" I could hear something different in her voice. Not fear. Not anger. Just exhaustion. I didn't ask questions. I simply said, "I'll be there." I had no idea that the conversation waiting for me the next morning would change the way I looked at my son-in-law forever. The next morning, I arrived at their house earlier than usual. The front door was already unlocked. When I stepped inside, everything looked normal. My granddaughter was sitting on a blanket in the living room, happily playing with her toys. The television was on. A cartoon was playing. It looked like an ordinary morning. But the moment I saw my daughter's face, I knew something was terribly wrong. She hadn't slept. Her eyes were red. The smile she always forced for everyone else was gone. She waited until my granddaughter crawled into the playpen before speaking. "Dad, I need to show you something." She walked into the kitchen and placed a small gift bag on the table. I looked inside. A silver bracelet. Then she handed me the receipt. I read the date. Their wedding anniversary. I looked back at her. "He said he didn't buy me anything." She nodded. "He didn't." For a long moment. Neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked, "Did you ask him about it?" She slowly shook her head. "No." "Why not?" "Because if he lies, I'll lose the last piece of hope I'm still holding on to." Those words broke my heart. She wasn't trying to catch her husband. She was trying to save her marriage, even if she had to lie to herself. I reached across the table and held her hand. Maybe there's another explanation. The moment those words left my mouth, I realized I wasn't trying to convince her. I was trying to convince myself. Just then, the front door opened. He had forgotten an important file and had come back home. The moment he saw me sitting at the kitchen table, he smiled. "Morning, Dad." I smiled back. "Morning." He kissed my granddaughter on the forehead. Then he looked at my daughter. "Everything okay?" She smiled. "Everything's fine." It was the first lie I had ever heard my daughter tell. He picked up his file and left again. A few seconds after the front door closed, the smile disappeared from her face. She whispered, "I don't even recognize him anymore." That afternoon, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Something deep inside me kept saying, "Find out the truth." For the first time since they got married, I decided to do something I had never imagined I would do. I followed my own son-in-law. The next evening, I parked my truck across the street from his office. I felt ashamed. Parents aren't supposed to spy on their children's spouses. But I couldn't ignore what I had seen. Almost an hour after everyone else left the building, he walked outside. He wasn't alone. A woman was standing beside him. She looked to be in her mid-30s. Well-dressed. Confident. The two of them laughed about something. Then, without any hesitation, she reached over and gently fixed his tie. He didn't step back. He didn't stop her. Instead, he smiled. The kind of smile I hadn't seen him give my daughter in months. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. I wanted to get out of the truck. I wanted to confront him right there. But I didn't. Instead, I watched them walk toward a nearby restaurant together. I sat there for nearly 20 minutes, trying to convince myself that there had to be an innocent explanation. Then I saw something that erased every excuse I had been making in my head. As they came out of the restaurant, she slipped her hand into his, and he didn't let go. In that moment, I realized the nightmare my daughter feared had already become reality. The hardest part wasn't discovering the truth. The hardest part was figuring out how I was ever going to tell my little girl. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the same picture. My son-in-law, walking hand in hand with another woman. By morning, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to tell my daughter until I knew the whole truth. One photograph, one dinner, one moment wasn't enough to destroy a family. I needed answers, not assumptions. For the next several days, I watched quietly. I never wanted to become the kind of man who followed people. But I loved my daughter more than I hated what I was doing. 3 evenings in a row. He didn't go straight home after work. Instead, he drove to the same apartment building on the other side of town. Every single time. He stayed there for hours. Then he came home acting as if nothing had happened. One evening, I saw him carrying shopping bags inside. Another day, He walked in holding a bouquet of white lilies. White lilies. The same flowers he used to bring my daughter every anniversary. I sat inside my truck, staring at those flowers, feeling my chest grow heavier. There was no misunderstanding anymore. No innocent explanation. Only betrayal. That weekend, my daughter came over with my granddaughter. The little one ran into my arms, laughing. She had learned to say one new word. Grandpa. I smiled and picked her up. For a few precious minutes, I forgot everything else. Children have a way of bringing light into the darkest days. While my wife took our granddaughter into the backyard, my daughter sat beside me on the porch. She looked tired. But this time, there was something different in her eyes. She wasn't confused anymore. She looked prepared. She broke the silence first. Dad, if someone stopped loving you, would you want to know the truth? I looked at her carefully. What makes you ask that? She took a slow breath. Because I think. I picked them up. They were bank statements. Page after page. There were expensive restaurant bills, luxury hotel payments, jewelry purchases, weekend trips. Thousands of dollars had disappeared over the last 6 months. I frowned. Did you buy any of these? She shook her head. No. Did he? I asked him. He said they were business expenses. She gave a small, painful smile. But Dad, he doesn't have a company. The porch became completely silent. Then she reached into her bag again. This time, she placed a photograph beside the bank statements. The moment I saw it, my stomach dropped. It was the same woman I had seen outside the restaurant. Only this picture was different. She was standing beside him, her arm wrapped around his waist. Both of them were smiling at the camera. The photo hadn't been taken secretly. They were posing for it. My daughter looked down at her hands. I found it in his cloud account. He forgot to log out of the family tablet. A tear rolled down her cheek. I didn't go looking for it. It was just there. I couldn't speak. There was nothing left to deny. Nothing left to explain. The truth was sitting right in front of us. My daughter wiped away her tears. Then she looked directly into my eyes. Dad, I think my marriage is over. I reached across the table and held her hand. No, I said quietly. Your marriage didn't end today. It ended the day he chose to betray the family that loved him. She nodded. But before either of us could say another word, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway echoed through the yard. He wasn't supposed to be home for another 3 hours. Yet there he was, stepping out of his car, walking toward the front door, completely unaware that his secrets had finally caught up with him. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. My daughter quickly gathered the bank statements and the photograph from the table, not because she wanted to protect him, but because she wasn't ready to confront him in front of her child. Our granddaughter was still playing in the backyard with her grandmother. She deserved one more peaceful afternoon. The front door opened. He walked inside carrying a small paper bag. The moment he saw both of us sitting on the porch, he looked surprised. I thought you'd be at work, Dad. I smiled politely. I finished early. He nodded. Then he held up the paper bag. I brought everyone's favorite donuts. If someone had walked past our house at that moment, they would have thought we were the perfect family. A loving husband, a devoted father, a proud grandfather. Appearances can be dangerously convincing. We all went inside together. For the next hour, everyone acted as if nothing had happened. My wife poured coffee. Our granddaughter ran from one person to another, laughing. He played with her on the living room floor. He even lifted her into the air until she squealed with joy. Watching him, I couldn't understand it. How could a man laugh with his daughter, while secretly destroying the home she would grow up in? Late that afternoon, my wife took our granddaughter upstairs for her nap. The house finally became quiet. My daughter looked at him. We need to talk. He looked at her calmly. About what? She took a deep breath. I know about the other woman. The smile disappeared from his face. For several long seconds, he didn't say a single word. Then he laughed. Not because something was funny, but because he didn't know what else to do. I think you're imagining things. She slowly placed the photograph on the coffee table. He looked down. The color drained from his face. He picked up the picture, turned it over, then quietly placed it back down. Neither of them spoke. Finally, he whispered, "Where did you get this?" She ignored the question. "Who is she?" He rubbed his forehead. My daughter shook her head. A friend doesn't hold your hand. A friend doesn't spend weekends with you. A friend doesn't receive jewelry you claimed you couldn't afford for your wife. The room became painfully silent. He stood up and began pacing across the living room. Then, without looking at anyone, he said the words that shattered what little hope remained. I never wanted this to happen. My daughter's voice trembled. Then why did it? He closed his eyes. It just happened. No, it didn't. Affairs don't just happen. They begin with choices. One choice after another. My daughter stood up. Her hands were shaking. So answer me honestly. Do you love her? He stayed silent. That silence was louder than any answer he could have given. A tear rolled down my daughter's face. She nodded slowly. I understand. Then she asked one final question. The day our daughter was born, were you happy? This time he answered immediately. Of course I was. She looked straight into his eyes. Then when did we stop being enough? He didn't answer, because there was no answer that could erase what he had done. After nearly a minute of silence, he finally spoke. I didn't mean to hurt you. My daughter gave a quiet, heartbreaking smile. But you did. And you didn't just hurt me. She pointed toward the staircase where their little girl was sleeping. You hurt her too. Those words hit him harder than anything else that had been said. For the first time, he lowered his head, ashamed. But sometimes, regret arrives only after the damage is already beyond repair. Then he quietly said something none of us had expected. I think we should separate for a while. The room fell completely silent. My daughter stared at him in disbelief. She had prepared herself to hear lies. She had prepared herself to hear excuses. She had never prepared herself to hear her husband give up on their family so easily. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't a man trying to save his marriage anymore. It was a man already planning his way out. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence inside that living room felt heavier than anything I had ever experienced. My daughter looked at the man she had loved for nearly a decade. Then she quietly asked, So that's it? You're giving up? He took a deep breath. It's not that simple. It actually is. You either fight for your family, or you walk away from it. He looked toward the floor. I don't want us to keep hurting each other. My daughter couldn't believe what she was hearing. Hurting each other? She pointed to herself. I wasn't the one sneaking around. I wasn't the one lying every single day. I wasn't the one spending our family's money on another woman. So don't stand there and pretend we're equally responsible. He stayed silent, because he knew she was right. A few seconds later, our granddaughter's tiny footsteps echoed from the hallway. She had just woken up from her nap. The little girl rubbed her sleepy eyes. The moment she saw her father, she smiled. Daddy. She ran as fast as her little legs could carry her. Without thinking, he picked her up. She wrapped her tiny arms around his neck and kissed his cheek. I missed you. The entire room fell silent again. My daughter turned her face away. My wife quietly wiped tears from her eyes. I couldn't even look at them, because that little girl had no idea that the man holding her would soon choose to walk out of her life. After dinner, he asked if he could take a short walk outside. No one stopped him. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Finally, my daughter looked through the front window. His car was gone. She called his phone. No answer. She called again, straight to voicemail. Around midnight, a message finally appeared. It was only one sentence. I need some time. Please don't try to contact me. Nothing else. No apology. No explanation. No mention of his wife. No mention of his daughter. Just one cold sentence. My daughter read it 3 times. Then she quietly locked her phone. She didn't cry. Not anymore. Some pain becomes too deep for tears. The next morning, she drove to their house alone. She thought maybe he had come back during the night. Maybe he had calmed down. Maybe he regretted leaving. The driveway was empty. She unlocked the front door. The house felt strangely quiet. She walked upstairs. His closet was half empty. His suitcase was gone. Several drawers had been cleared out. His passport, his laptop, even the framed wedding photograph from his side of the bed had disappeared. He hadn't left in anger. He had planned it. Slowly, carefully, long before anyone realized. My daughter sat down on the edge of the bed. She looked around the room they had shared for 8 years. Every wall held a memory. Every corner reminded her of the life they had built together. And now, all that remained was silence. A few minutes later, her phone rang. She looked at the screen. It was a number she didn't recognize. She almost ignored it. But something told her to answer. A calm female voice spoke first. "Hello. I think we need to talk." My daughter frowned. "Who is this?" There was a brief pause. Then the woman quietly replied, "I'm the woman your husband has been seeing." What she said next made my daughter's blood run cold. "There's something about him that you don't know." My daughter couldn't speak. For several seconds, she simply stood there, holding the phone against her ear. Finally, she whispered, "What do you want?" The woman answered calmly, "I don't want to fight with you. I just think you deserve to know the truth." My daughter almost laughed. "The truth? You've been having an affair with my husband. What truth could possibly be worse than that?" The woman was silent for a moment. Then she quietly said, "I didn't know he was still living with you." That sentence caught my daughter off guard. "What?" "He told me the marriage ended months ago. He said you were only staying in the same house because of your daughter." My daughter closed her eyes. Another lie. Another betrayal. The woman continued, "He told me the divorce papers were almost finished. He said both of you had already agreed to separate." My daughter felt her knees grow weak. None of it was true. Not a single word. She slowly sat down on the edge of the bed. The woman spoke again. "I found out the truth yesterday. I confronted him. He admitted everything. I ended the relationship." My daughter didn't know what to feel. Anger, relief, disbelief. Everything seemed to hit her at once. Then the woman said something unexpected. "I'm not calling to ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. But I couldn't keep living with the guilt." Before ending the call, she quietly added, "There's one more thing. Be careful. He's hiding something much bigger than the affair." The line went dead. My daughter stared at the phone. She replayed those final words again and again. "He's hiding something much bigger than the affair." That evening she came to my house. She told me everything. Every single word. When she finished, I asked the question that had been bothering me all day. "Did she tell you what she meant?" My daughter slowly shook her head. "No. She only said I should be careful." For the next 2 days, we heard nothing from him. No phone call. No message. Nothing. Then, on the third morning, someone knocked on my front door. I opened it. A man in a dark suit stood outside. He held a leather briefcase in one hand. "Good morning. I'm looking for your daughter." "Who are you?" "I'm an attorney. I've been asked to deliver some legal documents." My heart immediately sank. I already knew. Nothing good was inside that envelope. A few minutes later, my daughter walked into the living room. The attorney handed her the envelope. She thanked him, closed the front door, then slowly opened it. The first page made her hands tremble. Was a financial disclosure. According to the documents, my son-in-law was demanding half of everything they owned. The house, their savings, their investments, even the college fund they had started for their little girl. My daughter stared at the pages in disbelief. "He can't be serious." I kept reading. Then I noticed something else. There was a list of debts. Large debts. Credit cards. Personal loans. Private lenders. The total amount was well over $300,000. I frowned. My daughter looked at me. "What is it?" I slowly turned the papers toward her. "Have you ever seen these loans before?" She scanned every page. Her face slowly turned pale. "No. I've never applied for any of them." Then she stopped on one signature. Her breathing became uneven. "Dad, that's my name." She looked closer. "That's supposed to be my signature. But I never signed this." The room fell completely silent. One by one, we checked the remaining documents. Every loan had been approved using her name, her identity, her personal information. But the signatures weren't hers. Someone had copied them. My wife covered her mouth. "Oh my God," my daughter whispered. "He used me. He used my identity." For several minutes, none of us spoke. Everything suddenly made sense. The secret phone calls, the missing money, the endless excuses, the expensive purchases. It had never been just an affair. He had been living a second life, using the financial security of the woman who trusted him the most. Just then, my daughter's phone rang. It was her bank. The woman on the line sounded professional. "Ma'am, we're calling regarding several missed payments on your outstanding loans." My daughter interrupted her. "I don't have any loans." The representative paused. "According to our records, you signed the agreements over the last 2 years." "I never signed anything." There was another silence. Then the representative quietly said, "If that's true, you need to report this immediately." After the call ended, my daughter looked at me with tears in her eyes. He didn't just break our marriage. He tried to destroy my future. I stood up. For the first time in my life, I wasn't thinking like a father. I was thinking like a man who wanted justice. I looked at my daughter and said, "We're done protecting him. No more excuses. No more silence. Tomorrow morning, we're going to the police." My daughter nodded slowly. For the first time in weeks, I saw something return to her eyes. Not hope, not happiness, determination. She had spent her entire military career fighting for strangers. Now, she was finally ready to fight for herself. Neither of us realized that my son-in-law had already anticipated this move. And before sunrise the next morning, he would make one desperate decision that would change this case forever. Before sunrise the next morning, my phone rang. It was 5:42 a.m. Calls at that hour never bring good news. I answered immediately. "Hello." A calm voice replied. "Is this the father of?" Before he could finish, I recognized the tone. It was a police officer. My heart immediately began pounding. "Yes." "What's happened?" The officer spoke carefully. "Sir, we need you and your daughter to come to the station. I'd rather explain everything in person." I looked at my daughter. She was already awake. The expression on my face told her everything. Neither of us spoke during the drive. Every possible thought crossed my mind. Had he disappeared? Had he been arrested? Had he run away? When we arrived, an investigator greeted us and led us into a small interview room. He placed a thick file on the table. Then he looked directly at my daughter. "Ma'am, last night, your husband tried to leave the country." Neither of us moved. The investigator continued. "He booked a one-way international flight. He was carrying several passports, large amounts of cash, and important financial records." My daughter closed her eyes. So, he really had been planning everything. The investigator slid several photographs across the table. Pictures of cash, luxury watches, stacks of documents. Then he placed one final photograph in front of us. It showed several forged loan agreements. Each one carried my daughter's forged signature. "We believe these documents are connected to an ongoing financial fraud investigation." He looked at my daughter again. "Based on the evidence we've collected so far, we believe you're a victim. For the first time since this nightmare began. Not because the pain was over, but because someone finally believed her." The investigator wasn't finished. "We also recovered a laptop from your husband's luggage. Our digital forensic team has already examined part of it." He opened the file. Inside were printed emails, bank transfers, fake contracts, identity documents. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. For nearly 2 years, my son-in-law had been secretly using his wife's identity to secure loans and move money through accounts she didn't even know existed. The affair had only been a distraction. The financial fraud had always been his real secret. The investigator leaned back in his chair. "We're preparing criminal charges. But before we proceed, we'll need your full cooperation." My daughter looked at him without hesitation. "You'll have it." As we stood to leave, the investigator said one final sentence. "There is one thing you should know. Your husband has been asking to see only one person since his arrest." My daughter frowned. "Who?" The investigator looked at her quietly. "You." She didn't answer. She simply looked out the window. The man who had lied to her, betrayed her, stolen from her, and tried to leave the country, now wanted 5 minutes of her time. She turned toward me. "Dad, I don't know if I should see him." I placed my hand on hers. "The decision is yours. No one else gets to make it." She looked down for a long moment. Then she slowly nodded. "Okay. I'll see him." Neither of us knew that the conversation waiting inside that interrogation room would be the last time she would ever look into her husband's eyes. An officer led us down a long, quiet hallway. Every step echoed against the concrete floor. At the end of the corridor, there was a small interview room. The officer stopped outside the door. He looked at my daughter. "You don't have to do this." She gave a small nod. "I know." Then she looked at me. "Dad, will you wait for me?" I squeezed her hand. "I'll be right here." She took one deep breath and walked inside. The door closed behind her. For the next few minutes, I sat alone on the wooden bench outside. I kept staring at the floor, praying she would come out stronger than she went in. Inside the room, he was already sitting at the table. His hands were cuffed. His expensive suit had been replaced with a plain gray detention uniform. For the first time in years, he looked like a man who had run out of lies. He slowly lifted his head. When he saw my daughter, his eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry." She remained standing. She didn't sit down. She didn't move any closer. She simply looked at him. The man she had once trusted with her whole life now looked like a complete stranger. He spoke again. "I never wanted things to end like this." She answered quietly. "You had hundreds of chances to stop. You chose not to." He lowered his eyes. "I know." A long silence followed. Then he whispered, "I loved you." My daughter looked at him for several seconds. Then she asked the one question that had lived inside her heart ever since she found the truth. "If you loved me, why did you keep lying?" He didn't answer. Instead, he covered his face with both hands. "I got into debt. I thought I could fix it before you ever found out." She listened without interrupting. "I borrowed money. Then I borrowed more to pay the first loans. It kept getting worse. When people started demanding payment, I panicked. So you stole my identity." His voice cracked. "Yes." "And the other woman?" He closed his eyes. "She wasn't part of the fraud. I lied to her too." My daughter stood there in complete silence. Everything he said confirmed what she already knew. He hadn't made one terrible mistake. He had made hundreds of choices, one after another, day after day, month after month. Finally, he reached into his pocket. The officer immediately stepped forward. "It's okay," he said. "It's already been checked." He slowly placed a small object on the table. It was his wedding ring. He pushed it toward my daughter. "I don't deserve to wear it anymore." She stared at the ring. It had once meant forever. Now, it was only a piece of metal. She gently picked it up. For a brief moment, he looked hopeful. Then she quietly placed it back on the table. "No, you keep it. It should remind you of the family you chose to lose." Those words hit him harder than anything else. He broke down crying. Not quietly, not politely. He sobbed with his head lowered onto the table. My daughter didn't cry. She had already cried enough. She turned toward the door. Just before leaving, she stopped. Without looking back, she said, "I truly hope one day you become a better man, but you will never again be my husband." She opened the door and walked out. The officer closed it behind her. When I saw her in the hallway, I immediately stood up. She walked straight into my arms. For the first time since this nightmare had begun, she allowed herself to cry, not because she wanted him back, but because she was finally letting him go. As we walked toward the exit, my granddaughter's tiny face appeared in my mind. She deserved more than broken promises. She deserved peace. And from that day forward, my daughter made one promise to herself. No matter how difficult life became, her little girl would never grow up doubting how deeply she was loved. The months that followed were some of the hardest our family had ever faced. The divorce moved forward. The criminal investigation continued. Every few weeks, my daughter had to meet with investigators, lawyers, and financial experts. Each meeting forced her to relive the nightmare all over again. But she never complained. She answered every question, signed every document, faced every hearing. The woman who had once worn an army uniform now fought her battles inside courtrooms instead of on military bases. Our granddaughter was too young to understand what was happening. She only knew one thing. Daddy wasn't coming home anymore. At first, she asked every evening, "Where's Daddy?" My daughter would kneel beside her and gently brush the hair away from her face. Then she would smile and say, "Daddy is away right now." She couldn't bring herself to tell a little child the truth. Not yet. Months passed. The questions slowly became less frequent. Children have a heartbreaking way of accepting the things they cannot understand. One Saturday morning, I was fixing an old fence in my backyard. My granddaughter walked over carrying a tiny plastic hammer. "Grandpa, I help." I laughed and handed her a small piece of wood that wasn't important. She copied every movement I made. Every few minutes, she looked up to see if I was smiling. I always was. While we worked together, my daughter watched us from the kitchen window. For the first time in a long while, I saw her smile without forcing it. It wasn't a big smile, but it was real. Little by little, life began to feel normal again. She found joy in the smallest moments. Reading bedtime stories, making pancakes on Sunday mornings, watching her daughter chase butterflies across the yard. The pain hadn't disappeared. It had simply stopped controlling every moment of her life. Then, almost a year after everything fell apart, the criminal case finally reached the courtroom. The prosecutor presented the evidence: forged signatures, bank records, fake loan agreements, financial transfers, digital messages. Everything pointed to the same man. He stood before the judge with his head lowered. No expensive suit, no confident smile, no excuses left to hide behind. When the judge asked if he wished to say anything before sentencing, he slowly stood. For a moment, the courtroom was completely silent. He turned toward my daughter. His eyes were filled with regret. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me." Then he looked toward the little girl sitting beside her. His daughter. She was coloring quietly in a children's activity book, completely unaware of the moment unfolding around her. His voice broke. "I hope, one day, she remembers the father I wanted to be, not the man I became." My daughter lowered her eyes. She didn't respond. Some apologies come far too late. The judge announced the sentence. The courtroom remained silent. As officers escorted him away, he looked back one final time. Not at my daughter. Not at me. At his little girl. She never looked up. She was too busy coloring a bright yellow sun on her page. And somehow, that innocent little drawing reminded me that life always finds a way to begin again. When we stepped outside the courthouse, my granddaughter reached for my daughter's hand. Then she reached for mine. The three of us walked toward the parking lot together. No reporters. No celebration. Just three people, trying to build a new life from the pieces that had been left behind. As we reached the car, my granddaughter looked up at her mother and smiled. "Mommy, can we get ice cream?" My daughter laughed through tears. "Yes, sweetheart. We can get ice cream." In that simple moment, I realized something. Justice had punished the man who betrayed us, but love was the thing that truly saved our family. Years passed. Life slowly found its rhythm again. The court case became a memory. The headlines disappeared. The phone stopped ringing. And little by little, our family learned how to smile without pretending. My granddaughter grew into a bright, kind, and fearless little girl. She loved books. She loved drawing. And every Sunday morning, she insisted on making pancakes with her mother. Most of the pancakes came out burnt. We ate them anyway, because those mornings weren't about perfect food. They were about healing. My daughter never remarried. Not because she stopped believing in love, but because every spare piece of her heart belonged to her little girl. She returned to serving her country. When duty called, she answered. When she came home, she took off the uniform and became nothing more than a loving mother. No matter how exhausted she was, she never missed bedtime stories. She never missed birthdays. She never let her daughter doubt how deeply she was loved. One rainy afternoon, when my granddaughter was 12 years old, she found an old photo album in the attic. She carried it downstairs and sat beside her mother on the couch. "Mom, who's this?" She pointed to a wedding photograph, a picture taken years before her world had fallen apart. My daughter looked at it for a long time. Then she quietly smiled. "That's your father." The little girl looked confused. "I've seen his pictures before. But why don't we ever see him now?" The room became silent. My daughter looked toward me. I could tell she was wondering whether today was finally the day. I gently nodded. She took her daughter's hand. "There are some people who make mistakes, and there are some people who keep choosing the wrong path. Your father made choices that hurt our family, but none of those choices were ever your fault." The little girl listened carefully. Then she asked the question every child eventually asks. "Did he love me?" My daughter's eyes filled with tears. She answered honestly, "I believe he did. But love isn't only something we feel. It's something we prove. And sometimes, people fail to prove it." Our granddaughter looked down at the old photograph. Then she quietly closed the album. After a few seconds, she wrapped both arms around her mother. "I don't need him. I have you." No medal my daughter had ever earned. No promotion she had ever received. No victory she had ever celebrated could compare to hearing those words. I watched them hug each other, and I silently thanked God, not because our family had escaped heartbreak. We hadn't, but because heartbreak had never stolen our ability to love. As I sit here today, telling you this story, People often ask me if I hate the man who destroyed my daughter's marriage. The answer surprises them. No, I don't hate him. Hate is another prison. He built one prison for himself through greed, lies, and betrayal. I refuse to build another inside my own heart. What I do feel is sadness. Sadness that one man's selfish choices cost him the chance to watch his daughter grow up, to hear her laugh, to celebrate her birthdays, to see the incredible young woman she became. Those are moments no court can ever give back. If there's one lesson I've learned from all of this, it's this. Trust should be protected. Love should be earned. And family is never defined by the person who walks away. It's defined by the people who stay. Thank you for listening to my daughter's story. If it touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel and share it with someone you love. Because sometimes, one story can remind us never to take the people who truly stand beside us for granted.